NATO: How the World Encountered Communism. Why was NATO created? NATO was created shortly after World War II. Europe was in ashes, and communism was beginning to seem more and more tempting to the citizens of Europe. The US, being in favor of capitalism, couldn't have this, so Secretary of State George Marshall proposed a program of large-scale economic aid to Europe, the resulting European Recovery Program, also known as the Marshall Plan. The Soviet Union's refusal to aid this plan resulted in Europe continuing to be in favor of capitalism, but a deep schism was forming between Eastern and Western Europe, with Western Europe being in favor of capitalism and Eastern Europe being in favor of communism. From 1947 to 1948, a series of events caused the nations of Western Europe to become concerned about their security, and the United States to become more involved in European affairs. The ongoing civil war in Greece, along with tensions in Turkey, led President Harry S. Truman to state that the United States would provide economic and military aid to both countries as well as any other nation struggling against an attempt at oppression. These actions were beneficial for Western Europe, but furthered the schism in Europe. But things got worse. In Italy, a communist party was gaining power and was awfully close to winning an election, and a communist party had come to power on the eastern borders of Germany. Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, decided to test Europe by setting up a blockade and sealing the border. This caused tensions between the US and the Soviet Union, which would grow throughout the years. But Western Europe feared for its security, and many countries could be very easily conquered at the time. It was brought to the attention of the US of the possibilities that countries of Western Europe might deal with their security concerns by negotiating with the Soviets. This again would help the spread of communism, and so the US made an offer. They proposed a treaty that would aid any member if they signed. Initially, Great Britain, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, plus Luxembourg, signed the Brussels Treaty in March 1948. Their treaty provided collective defense. If any of these nations were attacked, the others were bound to help defend it. Shortly after, a U.S. senator proposed an all-out military alliance with Europe, but that was still relevant to the U.S., with it being so isolated in comparison. And this was when the North Atlantic Treaty was created, also known as NATO. Despite the countries' general agreement, this treaty still took several months to write, and several more countries were added to the alliance, including Canada, Iceland, Denmark, Norway, Ireland, and Portugal. Together, these countries held territory that forms a bridge between opposite shores of the Atlantic Ocean. And this would facilitate military action if became necessary. So to conclude, what happened to NATO after the collapse of the Soviet Union? After the collapse of the Soviet Union, NATO seemed less relevant and less promising to the citizens of Europe. With Europe no longer being in danger of any sort of invasion or communism, NATO seemed to have served no purpose at this point. But that is very wrong, because NATO was formed with the specific purpose of protecting less powerful countries from more powerful countries like the Soviet Union. And NATO still serves that purpose today. NATO thrived after the collapse of the Soviet Union because many countries wanted this guaranteed protection from all the countries that had joined NATO. This is still very tempting for many countries today, and promotes capitalism and the ethical treatment of people, which is why NATO is still relevant today, and NATO thrived. How will NATO grow in the future? Julieta Valls, the current U.S. ambassador to the country of Croatia.
What countries do you think will join NATO next?
In December of 2015, at a ministerial of NATO countries, they issued an invitation to Montenegro to prepare accession negotiations. If Montenegro meets all of the conditions to join NATO, it could become the newest member at the Warsaw Summit in July of this year. 3 other countries have also begun negotiations and discussions with NATO, although they're further behind in the process. And those countries are Macedonia, Bosnia, and Georgia. They could become members somewhere down the road.
Do you see NATO expanding in the future?
Absolutely. In addition to Montenegro, Bosnia, Georgia, and Macedonia, NATO has always had, since the time of its founding, and it's part of the NATO treaty, NATO maintains an open door policy. So it is open to the membership of additional countries in the future, and it also maintains relationships through its partnership program with other countries. So it's absolutely always been the policy of NATO to maintain this open door policy, and that means that there could be and should be additional members in the future.
And with that being said, I believe that NATO will grow in the future and will expand to Africa so that Europe, Africa, and North America can unify. I believe that NATO will be responsible for the eradication of communism overall and will help unify the world by striking fear into the hearts of communist countries and inspiring capitalist countries to do better. I feel that potentially NATO may even be a path to world peace, but for now, it will continue to expand to promote capitalism and eradicate what's left of communism in the world. How does this connect to the theme of encounter? This connects to the theme of encounter because it was the encounters with communism that brought Europe and North America together to fight a common enemy without a battlefield. It was the encounters of communism in Europe that helped people gain awareness of the corruption that comes with communism, and it was the encounter of communism that united Europe in the long run. Thesis: NATO is responsible for the protection of many countries, and its encounters with the Soviet Union helped protect vulnerable countries from converting to communism